Welcome to the Next Pivot Point podcast. This season, I am focused on sharing stories and ideas from global experts on diversity and inclusion. My purpose is to share diverse stories so that you can learn from others' lived experiences and walk away with actionable strategies to lead even more inclusively. I share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage, and you do not have to do it alone. At Next Pivot Point, I believe we are stronger together as allies. Let's meet this week's guest. Welcome to this week's episode of the Next Pivot Point podcast. I am thrilled to be joined with Alyshia Madlem, and she is the Executive Vice President at digital advertising agency Statwax, a client of mine, where she's in charge of all agency marketing and people operations. She creates and implements company-wide training and professional development initiatives, heads up all recruiting efforts and hiring efforts, and is the steward of the Statwax culture and DEI efforts. Alyshia sits on the IUPUI Kelley School of Business Career Services Advisory Panel and has served on the IWIT Social Media Advisory Committee and is the Ball State Center for Digital Marketing Analytics Advisory Board. She also has a bachelor's degree in communications from the Ohio State University, which is a fellow Buckeye. I appreciate the, and a certificate in strategic human resources from Cornell University online, and is currently pursuing a master's degree in management and leadership at Western Governors University. Alyshia, I'm so excited to be with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Well, tell our listeners, it sounds like you've been through quite a journey professionally. I know you personally, and you're very passionate and committed to diversity. Tell our listeners, how did you get into this work? What drew you to this work? And a bit more about your background.
Sure. Yes. You nailed it. I always feel like my background is more like a ball of yarn than some sort of linear type of journey. But I feel like that has informed the work for me and got me to where I am and the perspective that I bring to it. But I was always one of those people growing up. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was a pretty decent writer and loved reading. And so went really into a communications field when I was in college. I was actually going to be a history professor for a long time and then realized that I didn't want to be in school for 8 or 9 more years to do that. I really wanted to get out and start actually doing something with the education I had. So I went into communications field and came out and started my journey in public relations, which allowed me to have that writing background and really started to get my feet under me on the speaking part and really reaching out to journalists and things of that nature. And this was quite a while ago where there wasn't as much online options to do so. You were actually calling folks. But even early on in that journey, I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and I was in a very female-dominated industry at that time, and the business I was in was very female dominated, and I was able to get some good mentors in that area. But even at that young of age, I was in my early 20s at that time, I was running into some of those initial biases that folks bring to if you're a female presenting person about the type of work they thought I could do. And it was especially true in terms of trade shows. We'd get a lot of very interesting comments, a lot of sexist comments, biased comments, where people didn't think you knew what you were talking about, that you were there for what you looked like or for your presenting gender. And that really stuck with me, that I was impassioned by the fact that I wanted to prove I knew what I was talking about and that I wasn't the only one going through that experience. And I feel like that really informed some of the choices that I made after that as far as my career went. But I continued in public relations, and I actually moved from Los Angeles to Indiana, where I'm from, had lived away for about 9 years, and started to get into communications-based roles at smaller companies. I really liked smaller teams. I worked for some large places. I happened to work at both Disney and NBC when I lived in Los Angeles, and I had small teams there at big companies, but I really liked small companies with smaller teams because you were able to know everyone and able to feel like you were implementing a change or being able to contribute to the organization in ways I just didn't really feel like that at some of these larger places I had worked. So I intentionally sought out some smaller places. But I was always continuing to kind of be in that communications piece. But as I moved up in my career, I started to really lock on to the people side of the work. And I really was interested in how we found team members. I was really interested in how we built communities and networks internally, team building. How did we structure our teams for success? And so I started to sort of dip my toe in that water from the outside. I didn't have an HR background. I didn't have any of those more technical classes I had taken or anything like that. I was just interested and really wanted to be a part of some of those discussions. And so in my current company, I've been here since the beginning. I have an excellent founder who I worked under for 4 years at a different company previously. And he asked me to come when we formed Statwax 5 years ago to come over. And really, I was coming over in more of a project management type role where I was the liaison between our clients and our people. As we're an agency, other folks hire us to help them with their marketing. And I was good at that role, but he really saw in me as well. So I was lucky to have a mentor and someone who recognized talent in me that I maybe hadn't fully sculpted myself or recognized myself. But he came to me and said, I really feel like you have an aptitude at this. You've been involved in it. I would really like it if you would be open to starting the HR function here at the company and having someone dedicated to people. And that was really important because at the time we were only a company of 5 people. And so to really take your resources and say, I'm going to have someone dedicated to just the hiring function and not necessarily having 6 or 7 other jobs like small companies do, was really impactful for me to be able to concentrate and go towards that as something I did professionally on a day-to-day basis. And so about 4 years ago, I made that transition from being someone that was working directly with clients and was looking at the technical aspects of our work to the people side of our work being the full-time scope of my job. And I really loved it, and I still love it to this day. But it definitely did start to open some doors for me internally with our folks as I was there, the first person that they ever talked to, hired everyone, brought them in, to conversations started to come my way about ways we could improve the company from a people standpoint, from what we were doing from our work internally, that are things that I hadn't thought about. Or being, as I like to say, on the older end of millennial, were not the traditional workspaces that I came up with at the similar ages of the folks or work-life experiences of folks that I was talking to. And so it really started to open my eyes to the true fundamental nature of business had changed from when I was starting out. Business was business and home was home, or professional versus personal life was different. And yes, you were somewhat yourself at work, but you always had to have these lenses on it because there were all these other expectations on what you could do at work or what it meant to be a professional. And what I have learned now in this role is that there's a much larger blending. Those lines are much more blurred on what our employees and team members expect of us as a company. Is it just that we write checks to them to pay their bills or that we service our clients? It's that we take stands on things, that we take care of the folks who work here, that we create an environment that allows people to be who they are and bring perspectives and lived experiences that only enrich our staff and our clients. And that was a big thing for me that I had to sort of learn and be taught by our people. But really, once I saw that, tried to champion that internally to saying, how do I continually do the work to get there? And I was excited by that. And that has now infused its way into our hiring, into our training, into our professional development, our team building, all these other things I mentioned. And I think the biggest thing for me was that I sort of came into the work of like people and training were a banner issue for me. I never liked when we would sort of put someone in a position at either job title or job level and not really train them or teach them. It was sort of a very push you into the deep end and see if you can swim. And I always felt like, man, I don't like doing that. I know, our business, digital advertising agencies, we move really fast, but how can we prep people the best, even if it's quicker than I might want? How do we build folks for success? How do we keep them wanting to work here and give them the resources they need? And taking that and then coupling it with these asks that were coming from our people of basically for us to do more, take stances, prove it, if you will, has been an exciting challenge for me, and how I sort of have been able to go from, hey, I'm communicating on behalf of other people, i.e. our clients, to now being the communication facilitator for our employees internally, from me to our fellow executive team members, to other team members, to our clients via other people, but really trying to change that and take what originally got me into this generalized field and apply it to what is here today. And that's where I sit now and have really enjoyed being able to do so over the past few years.
Thanks for that progression. What an amazing story. The Midwest girl on the West Coast. I can identify with being from here and going other places like, wow, this is really different. And that broad exposure you get to those big companies versus finding your home in a small company and those stereotypes and biases that present themselves through the course of that journey too. So thank you for sharing that, Alyshia.
Sure.
I'm curious, y'all at Statwax started the diversity journey. I want to say like a year or so ago. I know we engaged last summer in some kind of strategy work and making sure that, we kind of thought through it holistically. Tell our listeners, like, how did the journey begin to focus on diversity? What was that like? And what were the things that worked along the way and the things that maybe are still challenges?
Yeah. So I think like many companies, everything on sort of the diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging spectrum for us had been something that we were trying to infuse, but in all transparency, was often kicked to the back burner for real business problems that were coming up that we needed to solve. And then we would maybe work on it, and then a couple of months would go by and we'd revisit, but it was very stop and start, like a train that didn't have all of its fuel. And so sitting in my role, it was something that I always was trying to champion, but it was hard because it wasn't quite viewed on the same level with some of our other business goals. And we didn't have the resources besides myself. And again, working at a small company, wearing several hats, I couldn't do all of that on my own. I really had to get support and buy-in from others at all levels. And we just hadn't really even had that conversation. It wasn't like anyone said to me, you can't do this or we can't do this. It was just, we weren't even talking about it. But for us, we had a definite catalyst to elevating the work. And it was the murder of George Floyd. And when that happened last year, our folks, we do tend to have a population that skews younger, more involved. And obviously our work being that we do digital advertising, we've got a lot of social savvy folks. And when that happened, we had our folks coming to us the next day asking us, are we going to say something about this? Are we going to do something about this? And as I mentioned, being someone who is a little bit more on the older end of millennial and my own biases that I had brought to the workplace, work was very much always, workplaces are neutral and people can have their own standings on it as individuals, but as workplaces, we really don't say anything. And that very much opened my eyes when we had a large part of our population come to us and say, we need to do something or say something. Our core values say X. And if we want to live in those core values, we need to be doing something or saying something. And so that was very eye-opening for me and was definitely a catalyst for us to say, okay, yes, we do need situationally to say something and do something, but what does that mean more broadly to our population, to who we have working here internally and who might work here? And it really started a large reflection on us as a company of saying to ourselves, okay, we talk about all of these things. We talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about having better recruiting practices, but what are we actually doing? And I think the catalyst of George Floyd's murder and the discussions that came internally, it really broadly came out for us as we need to start taking actions instead of just talking. And so we decided to sit down with our culture team, which is called the Statwax Squad. And they really, for us, look after 4 pillars for us internally that tie to our core values. And one of them is workplace environment and inclusion. And so we really sat down and started to say, all right, if we're going to take action on these particular pieces, what does that mean? And I'm sure like a lot of people, both that you see, Julie, and your clients and everybody else, I think the first initial reaction was, let's go get some training. And, let's have a consultant come talk to us. And that was sort of, we said, let's have a lunch and learn. And what I think was really great is not only our people internally, but when we reached out to you, Julie, and we talked to some other people who had been on this journey, it was like, hold your horses a second, take about 20 steps backwards and figure out, why are you doing this? Figure out a baseline. Where do you stand now? How do people feel about how you're doing in these areas now? Because otherwise, you could have a training on a lot of different things, but will that training be what's right for your folks? And so we took a big step back, and I did a lot of research, talked to folks internally, also started to get buy-in internally. So that was not only from my fellow executives, who I'm very lucky were hands down on board. Any resources you need, budget, time, feel free to focus on this, other employees. And then our fellow employees, our team members, who was interested in this work and wanted to be a part of it, which we got some good buy-in there. And we started simply with an inclusion audit. And we just pulled together some questions, and we sent a survey to our team that said, how are we doing in these areas? Things like recruiting and hiring, training, how we do performance reviews, that whole spectrum. And that gave us a starting place to say, all right, these are areas that our team doesn't think that we're doing well in. Now let's engage. And Julie was our choice, and a great one at that. But let's now engage with someone that will help us further sculpt these areas, where we can come out with a plan that's specific to improving these areas that our company, not me and my seat or executive team, is dictating, but that our entire population says are important. And so that's really where we started the work, and how we got to building a plan of action.
Yeah. It's that phrase that really resonates that I heard you say is like, let's do training, let's bring in a consultant. That I don't know how many calls I got, especially in June and July and August. And even still today, that it's like, we're looking for this Band-Aid to this massive wound. And taking, like you said, 20 steps back and thinking first, why are we doing this? What do we mean by this? And how are we going to intentionally and consistently show up in the space so it doesn't feel like a once and done, check the box exercise? So I'm so thankful to help everybody think that through strategically. Tell us what it's like, to have to, I think this work requires us to kind of start and stop. And, it's a bit of a run, and then it's a jog, and then sometimes it's like a walk and slow down, and you got to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
What has the journey been like since you started last summer?
Yeah. And something I want to say that Julie really helped us with is, it wasn't just the what should we be doing or the how. I think the most powerful question that we asked ourselves is, why now? Why are we doing this now? We could have done it 2 years ago. We could have done it 2 months from now, but why today? And that was a powerful thing for our team to think through, and helped inform the journey. And as you said, we all have the best intentions, and we set a plan, and then real life comes barreling in from the side. And especially because we have a client-based business, our clients can come in and definitely just blow up a day very easily, for they need a change or something has happened. And it can be easy to get lost in the trees for the forest type scenario, where you're just looking directly ahead of you. And so I think some ways that we were able to set ourselves up where we at least, as the saying goes, had progress, not perfection, was we really set it up to have a plan. And the plan was put into our project management system and accessible by the entire company. And we actually put deadlines to things and have updates that we give usually every couple weeks to a month to show the progress. So even if we didn't meet the deadline, people can see what steps are we taking towards it. And then we always try to give an update at our monthly staff meetings as well. So people know, even if they aren't reading the updates, they understand what's happening in the work. And I think that has been hugely monumental for us, for people to understand that we didn't just say something and then not do anything, or that it is an inconsistent work. We may have different levels of the ability to execute the pieces of the work at different times, but that the commitment remains there, and that we are committed to it. And it is something that we always have there. Sometimes we're working more towards it than other times. And that was huge for us. And so we set an entire 2021 plan at the end of 2020. And we really sat down and tried to group them together, our initiatives, so that we could have folks who are particularly interested in one component work on that component, versus trying to make it, hey, work with us on our DE&I initiatives. It was, are you interested in how we hire? Are you interested in how we train? Are you interested in how we talk to each other about performance? Are you interested in how we pay? And allow people to come into that conversation. And transparency has always been one of our core values. And so I think it has been helpful to show our folks that continually we mean it when we say it, and that they can be involved in this process. They can help us make our salary bands. They can help us reformat and reformulate our performance review system, and that there isn't excluding anyone based on their job title or what they do, that if you want to help, we're here to accept that. And so, as always, we've again had some times where we've been able to work on it more than others, but I think all of that has helped us just continue, even if it's a small step, that we're always going progressively in the direction of accomplishing, instead of just saying we put all this together and then we didn't do anything for several months. We're at least doing something small or big on a consistent basis. And we've heard good feedback from our folks that says to them, hey, even if it isn't in my face all the time, or I'm not seeing, huge initiatives rolled out, I understand that this step is one of 10 to get to the end. And I know, because you've done the first 10, that the last 10 will get done.
Yeah, it has to be this unwavering commitment and showing how the steps connect, right? And I think, to your point, this big splash program is so tempting to do. And then employees take note when nothing's discussed for 3 more months. And so being intentional, breaking a big goal into some smaller steps, and having a cascade of initiatives. I often say, like, diversity, equity, inclusion, not an initiative that's adjusted short term that it's going to expire.
Yeah.
But it provides a basis for a set of initiatives that we're constantly reprioritizing and shuffling, and in making sure that we're showing that long-term commitment. So I commend you for that. I know some cool things along the way, Alyshia, that you got a chance to share with me. Is like, oh, wow, like this is working. Like we're starting to see more inclusion. We're starting to see more diverse candidates, because, again, one of the temptations is we're just going to recruit more diverse candidates.
Right.
And I know that doesn't work if you're not being inclusive in the hiring, recruiting, and ultimately in the employee experience when they're with you. So what have been some successes that you said, like, I think this might be working? Like, we're starting to see good feedback. We're starting to see more diverse candidates. What's happened there?
Well, a couple of things as a precursor. One is, I think the biggest thing that we've done is really try to, as you said, these are not initiatives. I feel like DE&I is not something we do. It has to be part of the fabric of the organization. And so we really started to take a look at it, that this is being woven into the fabric of the organization in places it wasn't. It is not just something that we do, it is who we are. And we have to do that work. It has to be like that. It can't just be something that we do, because things that you do are very easily pushed off or abandoned. And that can't be what this is. And so that was huge. And, you mentioned the recruiting piece. I was listening to Jennifer Tardy, who has her own consulting business before this, and she was talking about, you can do all the diverse recruiting you want, but if you're not recruiting them into an inclusive, safe and brave space, it doesn't matter. They'll leave. And so it's thinking about the interconnectedness of all of these pieces and ensuring, like, do we have the setup that makes sure that we can support what we're trying to achieve? And the final thing before talking about a few successes was, I think the biggest aha for me along this work has been, there were things that we didn't even anticipate, that in starting the work, it opened up this whole other thing with inside of it. So, for example, we said, all right, we do want to evaluate our performance review system and how we teach people to give performance reviews. Okay, that was part of the work. But once we started to open that door, we realized, man, we should probably redo all of this, because based on what we're trying to get to, none of this actually works. So let's take a step back and ask our team leads what they think. Let's do some research. Let's reshape this. Let's do some design thinking around it, and let people contribute. But we really realized that some things that we thought, hey, we could make a tweak here or there, actually were much bigger. And we're going to take a lot more thought process of weaving into the fabric, making sure it fit who we were as a company and our core values, but also to actually ultimately get the thing that we wanted. We had to put a lot more into it than we thought. And I think that scares people sometimes, but it really energized us, that said, man, we might not have uncovered this if we had not started down this journey. So a few of the successes we've had, one has definitely been reaching out and getting some better representation from communities that had not before really been people who applied for jobs to work with us. Some of that's been because we've been able to utilize internal advocacy. Folks who are part of those groups have been underrepresented in our candidates beforehand. were energized by the work and said, I really want to help. Can I take these job descriptions into my communities? Can I take this initiative into my community and share with them and have them get back to you? And I felt like that was so powerful because I, of course, can go into communities and say, I hire folks and I have jobs open, but I have to realize my own limitations as a white cis woman. There's only so many communities I can be a part of without having to do the work to go into them as I should. But if folks internally were already in those communities and felt the power of what we were trying to do and really felt energized, I'd love to send them as an advocate if they volunteer to do so, which they did. And that really helped us start to say, okay, now we're getting some better candidate pools. We're able to say, hey, we're starting with this larger group of people with all these different perspectives and voices, which A, is helpful to the organization and our clients, but B, is just what you should do. That's what makes you a good employer and a good human being. So that was a really big one for us. And the second one that has been huge for us so far has really been the opening of feedback back to us on things and people getting involved in initiatives across the organization. So we now have had input into redoing our performance review system, redoing how we look at resumes, redoing how we give feedback to each other internally. And we've had increased sponsorship of folks from underrepresented communities who do work in our organization and the training to get them to the next level, trying to put that lens onto our promotions and our internal scaling. And so those have been some really big, good ones that have happened. And then some things that are probably more on the logistical end. We redid our employee handbook to be more reflective of some of the things that came out of our inclusion audit, better family leave, more inclusive pronouns and groups that we share our commitment to was also included in there. And some changes to our marketing. Both, we did a big review. We're still in the middle of completing it. But looking at how do we talk about us and what do we show about our organization? Because we were lucky to have people say to us, I am me, but if I saw a photo like this, or if I saw this type of language, that would make me more likely to refer someone to come into here, or for me to want to apply if I was not me and hadn't already worked here. So also completing that and getting through to changing and tweaking our language outwardly so people understand the environment they might be coming into if they were to come work with us. So far, that's what we're doing. Much more work to go, but already just really pleased with the way it's gone. And what we've been able to see from really good feedback internally of folks feeling like we're committed to this work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Especially that marketing review being a marketing agency.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Are the worst marketers of themselves. Usually it's like we put all our energy into our clients and we don't do it very well for ourselves. So we said, this is something we need to do. And not only, we needed to do it in two ways. It was a marketing review from a new business perspective, what might this tell people about us who want to be our clients? But then what does this tell people about us that might want to be our employees? And we tried to take that view in both lanes because it was very important that we understood how what we were presenting could impact both of those groups.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and you think about what you said, as we review our marketing, our performance review process, all these different pieces, as we get different perspectives around the table, reviewing things, we got better. And that's the beauty of diversity, equity, inclusion. It sounds like this really nice thing that we strive to have, and we can put it on the back burner when more pressing needs happen, especially in a client-facing business like yours and mine. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, no, if we're intentional and do this work, we just get better. Right?
Yeah. It's all interwoven, right? We talk about intersectionality in a lot of ways, and it's true. It's that the better we get in these areas, the more it infiltrates all pieces of the business. And I think people they think of DE&I as something very separate. This is something that we're going to do that's sort of separate from our business, but it is not. It definitely weaves its way into everything. And if you can elevate in those areas and get better, yes, it improves the business overall. And I don't know that everyone makes those connections quite yet. They maybe throw a lot of data points around and they know on a surface level, if I have a more diverse population amongst my employees, these are the things that people have seen who have done studies and data, but it's actually seeing every place that can go. It's very powerful.
Yeah. Well, and it's a competitive advantage too. You think about yourself as an agency in the Midwest. What agency is doing diversity really well?
Yeah. And if for us, some of our clients, especially because we work with higher education institutes, what students can look like and sound like, and their perspectives are so all across the board. And so for us, you're right, it is a good selling point because we say we have all of these different perspectives and life experiences internally. We're able to use that to translate to help you reach these students you want to come to your school. If we all look the same and sound the same or have had the same experiences, it limits our ability to help you talk to these folks. So on that level too, we have been able to say, here's how we can help you, client, in a way that's different than the more traditional methods they might be getting from folks who are competing against us for the business.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. So well said, Alicia. Well, and I know too, when you shared with me that you I remember you sharing too, we had a gender non-binary person apply for a position shortly after you'd begun to like really do this work. You're like, we're getting like, this is working. Like we are attracting different types of talent. We hadn't had that happen before. And that was like a really positive thing. Where I think if you hadn't been doing this work, we think a year before, and that would have been like really confusing. Like, what? They use the pronoun they? I don't know what that is. It's just funny how like when we put up our radar to these things and make adjustments, and to your point about baby step adjustments, we're signaling to others we're here, we're focused on this, we're getting better, and people believe it and they are attracted to that. So it's not that there isn't diverse talent out there. It's just they're waiting for the sign, like they call it like the bat signal sometimes. Like, this is a safe place for me to apply. I could work here and feel accepted.
Exactly.
You saw that evidence, which is just so amazing, even so early on.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely, for me, I understand more and more that, as I said, it doesn't matter if you can recruit folks from all different communities if you don't walk the walk and talk the talk internally. And so I think for us, it's yes, a lot of these types of efforts are on how can we bring folks into the organization that are from diverse populations and only help us and help them. And that's good business and good personhood. But if we can't or hadn't been able to reflect that internally, that is not a good situation. And so I think it was not only how are we concentrating outwardly, but the inward work our team has done to say, we're making sure and holding us accountable. Hey, hold us accountable. If you don't feel like this is in line with what we said, they're telling us and we're tweaking it and changing it. And I think that's also a powerful tool where it's not only helping with those efforts out externally, but the retention of what we're able to do internally is a part of this discussion as well, because folks are saying, you know what, I got what I signed up for. You did not sell me a false bill of goods here. We are actually doing what we're said we're going to do. And that it has created an environment where no matter the level of the person, interns all the way up, that people feel comfortable. And this is even to me directly, I understand my job title. I sit as the third top person in the organization after our founder and our president. I'm very personable, but I understand there's intimidation sometimes that comes with, I am Alyshia, executive vice president. And I'm excited because I get people at all levels that come to me directly and say, I know that you steward this work, not that you're doing it all by yourself, but here's how I want to help. Or here's a suggestion based on my own experience that could make this better. And the fact that they feel like they can tell that to a person that's at the upper level of the organization and not feel that they can't say something because the environment doesn't allow that has been probably one of the biggest wins for me, is that we have created a safe enough environment where people can say, hey, other places that I might not have felt that I could do this, or I was not brave enough to do this, but I feel like I can come to you and say, Alyshia, I don't like the way that this is worded, or, if this was me, this photo would say this to me, and I don't think that's what you mean. And that we welcome it and that we will actually take action based on that has been it's huge for me. And I can't emphasize enough how important that has been. Again, we already had a culture where we had a lot of good representation from voices and people did feel comfortable sharing things. But these are some deep things that folks will share with us that are based on their own lived experience, or how we might be including or excluding someone similar to themselves that I'm not sure would have fully been realized without the path of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, feedback is such a gift, and to not feel intimidated, as I know I often did in corporate America by senior leadership, just by the title itself.
Yeah.
When you create a culture of inclusion and have that open feedback mechanism, and people feel safe bringing their full self into the workplace, like you said, it's amazing how many ideas they have, how much more innovative we are, how much more agile we are, how much
Yeah.
more productive. The list goes on business
Indeed.
benefits, but it just, I think ultimately just feels like good, important, like meaningful human work, which at the
Yeah.
core of all of it, we all want to be like together and connected. And this work is so special in that way.
You spend this much time with people, right? When you
Yeah.
say, I spend more time with you than my spouse sometimes or my partner,
Yeah.
it's now not just again about here are the metrics we produce or the tactical work. That's of course important, but it's got to have all these other elements for someone to really be willing to commit that much of their life to
Yeah.
you as an organization. And I think that that has been very important for us to continue to create that environment where people are saying, yes, they, we do come to work to get a paycheck and be able to do all these things in life, of course, but we want to show up each day. We're excited to come here each day and to do the work across the spectrum from what our clients pay us to do to how we become a better organization. And that's very fulfilling, I think, for everyone at all levels for us.
Yeah. Well said, Alyshia. Well, tell our listeners more about Statwax and how they can stay in touch with you.
Sure. So, as was mentioned, we are a performance marketing agency, and you can find us at statwax.com. We do digital advertising, search engine optimization, data as a service, as well as some creative needs. Mostly, we work with clients in the higher education space and the SaaS space, or any folks who are in customer acquisition. So you can find out more about us at our website, again, statwax.com. That's ST as in Tom, AT as in Tom, WAX. And for myself, I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect if you would like. I'm always happy to have conversations and super excited to get to know other folks in the community. Or as always, if we're hiring, please reach out. Happy to have a call.
Oh, that's great. We'll link to your LinkedIn in the profile as well. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
with us today, Alyshia.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for all that you helped us to do. All I can say is if you're looking for some guidance on this work, Julie is tops. Please reach out to her.
Oh, that's such a kind, that always makes me feel really special and unsolicited, I promise, listeners.
It was. She did not ask me to do that. It is just the truth.
Thanks, Alyshia.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate you listening to this episode. If you like this podcast, the best way you can be an ally is to write a review on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Every review helps other allies find us. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together as allies.